All right, so I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. He is the spiritual leader and I guess technically the senior minister, although he's the only minister of the team. And, you know, he's been our spiritual leader now for, I don't know, 6-7 years. Yeah. And it's gone quickly and it's just gone beautifully. And also, again, just because it's the weekend of thanks, I'd like to do a great deal of thanks to Brian for what he does for this church. And now we get to hear what he has to say in terms of his message for today. So I'd like to introduce Reverend Brian Walker as our speaker.
Good morning. So for many years, 3 Jewish friends met daily in Tel Aviv for coffee. And over the years, they become more and more pessimistic about what's going on in Israel. You know, more terrorism, the economy's not going all that great, the tourists aren't coming. And so one of them announces one day that he has converted. And so the other two exclaim, "What?" He says, "Yes, I'm converting from being a pessimist to an optimist." And so a little time goes by, and one of the other pessimists turns to the newly converted optimist and says to him, "So if you've become an optimist, why do you still look so worried?" And his response was, "You think it's easy being an optimist." So as we've already observed, today starts the season of Advent. And Advent, of course, is the 4-week period before Christmas. And so it's a celebration, a preparation for the celebration of the birth of Jesus. And each of the 4 Sundays has a particular theme. Typically, it's done hope, peace, joy, love. And so it's a time that invites reflection, prayer, expectant celebration. And so that's what Advent is. A Latin word, means coming or arrival. And so for a lot of people, for those of you who had the experience of an Advent calendar, so it meant, looking at the calendar and, seeing usually there was a scripture verse or something. And in these days, these days, you can get an Advent calendar for virtually anything, whether it's eating chocolate or experiencing some tea or Legos or whatever it is, there's an Advent calendar for it. Anyway, and so, but celebrating Advent also means, in a deeper spiritual sense, living and practicing a generous way of love and care for our neighbors and the earth as we partner with Jesus and that Spirit to bring peace on earth. So it's a very important season that we observe as we come up to Christmas. And so, hence my title, Awakening Hope, the Light of Advent. Because this is the first Sunday, and so this is the theme. So now, I mentioned that little story about optimism because there's a significant difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is more general and more passive. So hope is more about action and it's more specific, so that we have a hope that something is going to pass, and we have the power to influence that. Now, hope is indispensable to human health, all aspects of our health, body, mind, and spirit. So people who are hopeless experience physical signs like a reduction in their immune system, the effectiveness of their immune system. Psychologically, it is affected in the way that we have far less resilience, so that we're not able to bounce back when something challenges us and we have some sort of pitfall. There are social effects as well. It affects how we relate to one another. And I think that hopelessness is one of the reasons that we see such disharmony amongst not only the people in this country, but around the planet. And it creates a feeling that there isn't, it's very dark, and that there really isn't, it isn't going to work out. So in polls, it shows increasingly that people think that we need violence to survive as a community, as a culture. And so hopelessness is very devastating. Being with hope, on the other hand, or having hope, is just the opposite. It lifts us up so that we have, so that people who are hopeful are happier. They are more resilient. They have a better immune system. They have a more authentic, more effective, better connection with other people. The social atmosphere around a group that has hope is deeper and more connection. This is a group, I think, that is hopeful. Yes. Can I get an amen? Amen. Yes. So spiritually, hope cultivates a feeling of optimism and faith in the unfolding of what's happening in our lives, our individual lives and our lives as a community. And it's typically described with light metaphors. So a ray, a beam, a glimmer of hope, or there's a break in the clouds, or the light at the end of the tunnel. All of these things are expressions of hope. So there is this feeling about, or this joining of hope and light. And so I want to explore that a little bit in the Judeo-Christian tradition, just kind of briefly. And so one of the first, in the Jewish tradition, Hanukkah is an 8-day celebration of light that is celebrated as the winter solstice approaches. And so it originated in the 2nd century before the Common Era, and it commemorates the rededication of the temple that had been destroyed by a foreign invader. And so the rededication of the temple as a home of God's glory is celebrated as the darkening deepens. And so what had happened was a small amount of oil that was lit in the temple burned miraculously for 8 days when people thought it was going to go out. And so part of the celebration is lighting a menorah candle each day for 8 days. And that symbolizes the increase in light and a defiant stance towards hopelessness. That there is this light that keeps burning, and it symbolizes the hope that we can have in our hearts. So Hanukkah starts this year. It moves around a little bit because of a difference in the calendars. Hanukkah starts this year, 2 weeks from today, December 14th. Now, if we look at the New Testament, according to the book of Acts, Paul had a life-transforming experience on the road to Damascus, and it was an experience of the risen Christ as light. So that was his experience, that Christ rose and that he experienced it as light. In John's gospel, John claims that Jesus is the light of the world. Now, in terms of Jesus' birth, we don't really know the date. We don't really know when it was. In fact, the scholarly evidence suggests that it was in the autumn of the year. But in the middle of the 4th century, Pope Julius declared December 25th as the date, thereby integrating it with the Roman winter solstice festival celebrating the birth of the conquered sun. So they were celebrating the winter solstice, and they chose that as the date for Jesus' birth. So the Roman birthday of the sun, S-U-N, became the Christian birthday of the sun, S-O-N. And you can see how that joined together, and it's related to the light, that we see that the light is, the sun is getting, the day length is getting shorter every day, and so the solstice calls back that light. And so that was the way that this date was chosen for the date of Christmas. So now as we look at the stories of Jesus' birth in the Gospels, or in the whole New Testament, so there are two Gospels, Matthew and Luke, that have stories of Jesus' birth. No birth stories in all of Paul's letters. In fact, no birth stories in Mark or in John, the other two Gospels. No birth stories in the whole rest of the Gospel, except in Mark and Matthew, which is very interesting. And those two stories, the stories in Matthew and Luke, are very different. The story in Luke has the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary, which we heard about earlier in the Daily Word. It has the story also of John the Baptist. And so when Mary went to meet John the Baptist's mother, the baby leapt in the womb, very, very marked image. And it's the story of the angel that appears to the shepherds, that Jesus is born in a manger. All those are parts of the story in Luke. The story in Matthew is really quite different. So Matthew has the story of an angel coming to Joseph in dreams. He has Herod trying to kill Jesus. So Joseph and Mary have to flee and take Jesus down to Egypt. And then when the danger passes, they come back to Nazareth. It has, of course, the story of the wise men who follow the star and find out where Jesus lives. So how do you make sense of all of this? Because there are these two single stories, or two spots in the Gospels, that have these very different stories. So when we experience it in our culture, it's all just mishmashed together. You see a scene in the creche, and it's in the manger, and then you've got the shepherds, and you've got the wise men, and everything just kind of is all meshed together, and we don't realize that these stories are told very differently. But one of the most prominent parts of the story, and particularly is relevant to our theme of light, is the three wise men who are following the star. And so it's a very interesting star, and in fact, usually about this time of year, there's a story in some magazine, some astronomy magazine or something, and they're trying to figure out, what was it? Was it a constellation, or were the planets coming together, or was there a particularly bright star? What was going on? And it really kind of misses the point, because the star, because the wise men come from the east, the star moves to the west, then it moves south to Bethlehem, and then it stops over the place where Jesus is born. And so it's like no other star that has been around that we've seen. And so the point is, there's a meaning to this star. It's not a literal meaning, because the star itself acts like a global positioning device that the wise men are following, and they get led to this certain place. And so it doesn't make a statement about an astronomical phenomenon. It makes a statement about Jesus, that his birth is the coming of the light that draws wise men to its radiance. So this light is very important. And so if we think about the star, it represents that inner light that we all have, that guidance that we all have. That if we follow that guidance, it'll take us to the place that we need to get to. So now, in the actual text of Matthew, it doesn't say how many magi there were. So a magus is the singular of the Latin magi, and it's from which we get our word magician. But these guys were not magicians in the sense that we use the word today. They are people who have connection to a greater reality. And so we have given them, as the story has unfolded, this particular kind of identification that there are three of them because there were three gifts. And as the tradition continued, we even give them names: Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar. So that we have taken, what was a fairly kind of nondescript kind of description and made it very specific. And this is what we live with in our culture and what we realize. But the truth of the matter is, they're not magicians. They're not wise men as we think of the term that we use that conventionally. They're even much more than astrologers, even though astrology may be something that they certainly used, and it was part of their special knowledge. But they were people who had a secret wisdom, more than earthly kind of wisdom. They were connected to the divine in a way that gave them this special knowledge. And that is, they can symbolically and metaphysically represent each of us on our spiritual journey. And that our soul's journey calls us, in spite of whatever kind of challenges we have, dealing with Herod or whatever other kind of challenges that we have, and that we can overcome that. Very important. So we're actually currently right now have a class on what the Gospels really teach about Jesus' birth, and so the authors in there write this: we do not think Matthew's story is historically factual. In our judgment, there was no special star, no wise men, and no plot by Herod to kill Jesus. Yet, this doesn't really matter. Because if you interpret what the stories mean, it's that they mean that there is something much deeper going on. So is the story factually true? No. But as a parable or a metaphysical, does it have truth? For people of faith, the answer is absolutely yes. Is Jesus a light shining in the darkness? Yes. Do the Herods of the world still seek to extinguish the light? Yes. Does Jesus still shine in the darkness? Yes. So one of the authors, who's one of my favorites, he's a distinguished early Christian scholar, he writes this. He says, "My point is not that those ancient people told literal stories and that we are smart enough to interpret them symbolically, but they told them symbolically and we are dumb enough to interpret them literally." It depends on your perspective. So how do we interpret these stories? How do we make sense of these differences in these stories? So Matthew and Luke agree on the critical points. The genealogy, where Jesus came from. He came from the family of David, so he's a royal. That's his royal lineage. The birth in Bethlehem, where the prophecy says that the Messiah will be born. The fulfillment of prophecy, the ending up in Nazareth. So So what is the meaning? The meaning is Jesus is the one. Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Jesus is the one who can show us the path to our personal transformation and how to create on earth the kingdom of God. So that's the message that, that Matthew and Luke want to make sure that they get across to us. And they use the stories that are most appropriate for the community that they're writing for. But the overall meaning, above and beyond the factual nature of it, is very, very clear to those who have ears to hear, and certainly to the community that they were writing for, that they got the message. So this is the first Sunday, the Sunday of hope, the light of Advent. I think it's legitimate to ask, so how do we activate hope? How do we make sure that we have that hope? Because it can get extinguished. And so in the process of doing some research for this talk, I came across two really intriguing resources. One of them is by Joanna Macy, who's a scholar of Buddhism and deep ecology and an author and a spiritual teacher. And she wrote a book, Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In Without Going Crazy. And the other one was Jamil Zaki, who's a Stanford psychology professor and author, and he wrote a book called Hope for Cynics, The Surprising Science of Human Goodness. And interestingly, from these different perspectives, they come up with a very similar kind of approach to activate hope in your life. And that for me is one of the things that gives me the most hope about the future of the human species. And that is, for the last couple of decades, at least, maybe a little longer, science has been generating all of this data that shows that what the wisdom traditions have been teaching for thousands of years is true, that it's true. So, what do Macy and Zaki agree on? That the way to activate hope is by doing some of the things that we are all very common with. One is mindfulness practices. So being present, facing reality, accepting what is, community engagement, so connecting with people in community and appreciating that and lifting each other up, fostering authentic relationships so that when we relate to ourselves and other people, that we're doing that in a way that we are doing it in an authentic kind of way, that we're being our real selves. And by facing our fears and insecurities. So very important that we're honest with ourselves as well. And so they have a suggestion for how you can activate that. And the most important thing that they agree on is that to activate hope, you need to act. You need to act. So again, the difference between optimism and hope is based on some sort of action. So there's the 3-step plan. So that there's a vision, that you have a vision, that you create a plan, and that you act. All right? Vision, plan, act. And so I will share a personal experience of how I'm activating hope for myself. So as most of you know, we are at the very end of this process of this merger with Unity 5 Cities and Unity San Luis Obispo, which actually we're just waiting to hear any day now that the state has completed the legal process. Which for me has been a bit of a challenge. And I say that because I love our little community here. And am honored to be the minister here. And that it is a little community here. You all know that we have one part-time employee, and that's me. So it's in a sense, I'm kind of semi-retired because even though I work very hard, it's a labor of love, and so it's very satisfying for me. So when this whole idea came, it was, is this really what I want? So let's create some hope. So what is it that I vision? I vision that we are going to live out our destiny. And friends, I believe our destiny is that having come from Unity San Luis Obispo and creating the light and the hope of and the energy of sacred community, that we are called to bring that community energy back there again as the light of Unity San Luis Obispo flickers and goes out. But we're called to do that. And as I search my soul, that I am part of that call, even though it may not be my favorite vote. So there's a plan. What is it that I'm called to do? Is right. So I need to stretch a little bit and grow. You know, change, are you familiar with that one? No, not me. Yeah, so I need to be a little better organized. I need to be a little bit more efficient. I need to delegate better. And so I have started to act, all right? And to respond to this call. So I spoke with my spiritual director. You know, he blessed me. I got some material about some stuff that I've looked at before but haven't implemented as kind of thoroughly as I would like about getting things done. So that's definitely on the program. And I'm sharing this with you now and acknowledging, you know, my fears and insecurities and asking and saying, you know, hey, I need some help. And I know that you guys do so much already, but the only way that we can do this is as a community. And I know that there are some of you who are sitting in here right now who were part of that group when this community started and broke off. And that I'm trusting that you all might feel that call yourselves and say, hey, you know, we can do something that is, you know, even greater than what we've done before, which is substantial, to create a community like this that really supports each other, that really invites everybody to give their gift in a really open, authentic way. And we can take the next steps that Spirit is calling us to do. Can I get an amen? Amen. Thank you. Okay. Yes. So we have created a steering committee, and that is ongoing, and so the board is addressing this. So there's a plan that's unfolding, and all of you, I am absolutely sure, will look into your heart to pray about it and respond to whatever it is you individually are called to do. So you know, in the Christian tradition, hope is one of the 3 theological virtues. So we always hear faith, hope, and charity. And so faith and hope, as we kind of got the message from the Daily Word today, they go together. They're reciprocal. They support one another. Our faith supports our hope, and hope supports our faith. But I think that we can even go beyond that and say that hope is a state of being. It's a state of being. Now, what do I mean when I say that? That it is an integral part of us because we believe that there's one presence and one power, and that we are an expression of that. That we have this divine nature, this Christ consciousness. And so when we talk about hope, that we are simply unfolding our natural essence as we live our lives, as we, like the three wise men, follow on and follow that star. So it's really critical for you to express that hope as something that is an essential part of your nature. It's both a present reality and a future expectation. Here, breathe with me. Yeah, just to be present right now and know that as we live our lives, that we have this integral part of hope, this DNA that's a part of us. So I encourage you to activate hope in whatever way that you're called to embrace the season of Advent. It doesn't need to be a routine kind of experience of the holidays that you've had in the past. Pay attention to what's happening. You are invited to honor the season of Advent and to welcome into your life this birth of the divinity and how it's going to unfold in your life. Most importantly, you need to act. All right? So if there's one takeaway that you take from today, and it doesn't have to be the biggest action in the world. Mother Teresa says, you can do small things and do them with love. That is the critical point. So Chris, why don't you give me the slide? But absolutely critical that you act. And so I'm inviting you to share this affirmation, to embrace this light that you are. But more than a light, a beacon. You are a beacon, especially in challenging times. Are these challenging times? Oh yeah, oh yeah. No quarrel there. Okay, so we're going to affirm this together. Together, I am a beacon of hope for myself and others, shining brightly through adversity. So take that with you, friends, and take it home. One more time with feeling. I am a beacon of hope for myself and others, shining brightly through adversity. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this thought. This is by the Indian poet Tagore. Hope is the finch who feels the light and sings when the dawn is dark. God bless you, friends.